What do you think? I mean, this is the next big live trial here on In Session. Our coverage, live coverage, begins on January 7th when we come back from our break. You don't want to miss this one. You heard her right there. She does not believe any jury will convict her. Is that because she talks like this? Or is that because there's evidence of self-defense? Problem she has is self-defense is story number 3 for her. Let me bring in my guest, criminal defense attorney Dwane Cates. Joining us from L.A., but he is Mr. Arizona. Great to see you, Dwane. Also with us is In Session law enforcement analyst and contributor Mike Brooks. All right, Dwane, I mean, am I crazy here in thinking that she is under the delusion that she can come into that courtroom, bat those eyelashes, flash that smile, speak in that voice, and tell the jury that Travis tried to kill me, so I had to stab him 27 times, slit him from ear to ear, and shoot him in the face in self-defense?
You know, Vinny, that might have worked had that been her story the first day. Had she called the police as soon as this happened, called 911 and said, oh my God, my boyfriend attacked me. But this has been a long, strange trip that we've been on. And she's gone in a bunch of different directions. And you know me, Vinny, I'm a defense attorney through and through, and
yes.
I can defend him to the end. But there are going to be some problems with this case.
Well, let me ask you, it's self-defense, so she has to testify, correct? There's no other way you get that defense in without her testifying.
Well, there is. I mean, you know, Jose Baez got a lot of stuff in without it actually coming in testimony. So, you know, you can make veiled assertions to things and make it look like that. You can probably get enough in to argue in the end that it was self-defense without her testifying. But mark my words, just the way she is and the fact that she's already given all these interviews, she is going to want to testify.
Hasn't just given interviews, Mike. There you see her in her stripes. I mean, I want to paint this picture for you, what we're showing you right here. This is her in the Maricopa County Jail with her jail suit on, Mike, sitting down and speaking with the local media, just having a presser, if you would, a press conference, Mike. This is, you don't see this, but this may just be what her makeup is, what her mindset is that I'm Jodi Arias, and if I sit here and tell you a story, you're going to believe it.
And, you know, I thought it was interesting, too, with Inside Edition, Vinny. She had on her prison bottoms, but her own top. You know, you can see the stripes down below, but she had on a different colored top. Oh, yeah, she's very convincing. But I noticed also, with Inside Edition, she looked him right in the eye. She did not blink, and she never blinks in that camera. There's no, I tell you, you get a body language expert, and just me looking at her, and if I was talking to her, she looks you right in the eye, and she tells you that story. And she's done that 3 different times with 3 different stories. I tell you what, but you're right, though. She is. I think she's going to have to get up there to explain herself. And is the jury going to believe her? That remains to be seen.
No jury is going to convict me, Mike. I've already established that.
I'm too pretty to put to death.
Yeah, well, I think...
I was waiting for that.
Well, I think that's what she's relying upon here, Dwane, because you take a look at a woman like this, right? And my guess is for most of her life, she's pretty much gotten what she's wanted. She's been able to convince people to do things for her, Dwane.
She's a very attractive woman. She's very well-spoken. And she's very, very convincing. And, you know, and she may very well be able to get on the stand and convince a jury. She's going to have to come up with a story why she told the other stories. And my guess is she's going to say, I was so scared. I was psychologically traumatized by it. I mean, she's going to have to justify the other stories. But, you know, had she told that story from the very beginning, she is convincing enough that I think she could have pulled it off.
You know, Mike, what makes this so scary is the contrast between how she presents herself and what the evidence in this case is about what prosecutors believe she did, which is, I mean, this is a brutal, brutal scene. 27 stab wounds, slit from ear to ear, and shot in the face. This is not your run-of-the-mill murder scene, yet when you look at her and listen to her and the way she presents herself, that contrast, I have never seen that in all my years here on In Session.
No, and think about that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 27 times, Vinny. Shot twice and then slit him from ear to ear. Now, if I'm her defense team, I'm gonna try to convince that jury that I couldn't come out with that self-defense because for whatever reason she was scared to. And why the brutality of 27 times, shot twice in the face and slit ear to ear? It was because of all of the times that he had abused her, and it just all came out at that particular time. That's what they're going to have to convince that jury, Vinny, if they're going to go with that self-defense.
Yeah, Dwayne, I want to look at this from the prosecutor's perspective, and I believe they're going to say this is a fatal attraction case, because that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Because there was a breakup, and after they broke up, that's when she moves into his neighborhood. I mean, my goodness, this is classic fatal attraction.
The prosecution's going to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to paint Jodi Arias as a psycho stalker. I mean, that is their whole case. I mean, they've got to convince a jury that she is just, she's just obsessed with this man. And from what I understand, most of his friends believe that she did all kinds of strange things after they broke up. And if the jury believes that she's this psycho stalker, then they're not going to find it hard to believe that she stabbed him 27 times and shot him in the face and slit his throat. So, it's not supposed to work that way, but that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, and Mike, we look at the evidence in this case, that camera, because there are photographs taken that day, and they are provocative photographs of both of them. So despite the fact that they broke up, they were together, apparently, that day, taking pictures of one another, and then there's gruesome pictures afterwards.
And then there's a timestamp on those pictures. And, is the defense going to attack the experts here and say, no, the timestamp was not correct? That's going to be tough to do. But I'm sure they're going to try to do that, Vinny, because it's just hours.
There's a lot of evidence, but, in either way you look at it, self-defense or brutal murder, it doesn't make sense because it doesn't really jive with these photographs that are taken beforehand, because apparently they are getting along and they're naked and they're taking pictures of each other, yet it ends in this brutal murder scene. So this is, or self-defense scene, I guess, depending upon your perspective. Our coverage of this trial begins, as I've been saying, January 7th. Live coverage, live here on In Session. You do not want to miss it. We're going to talk more. Grace Wong, our producer, is in the courtroom today. She's out there in Arizona. She's going to let us know what the latest is right now in jury selection and some of these pretrial motions that may involve some of those photographs. Powerful. If that comes in, that is powerful stuff. Renee Sandler, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, joins us as well right now. Renee, great to see you.
Great to see you.
That would be some great evidence for prosecutors, because that's one of the questions. Where does she get a gun from? And if you have her staging a burglary and doing all that, this is not a crime of passion. This is certainly not self-defense. This is premeditated, cold-blooded murder.
Vinny, it's speculative. There's
What?
no connection. That's speculative. And any evidence that comes into a court of law on either side has to be reliable. It has to meet the fundamental principles of due process. This is out in the dark here, and they have to link it up. It has to be relevant. It has to be more than just a hunch. Come on, this is not reliable evidence.
So you believe in coincidences?
I believe in proof. I believe in the rules of evidence, and I don't believe that this passes the reliability test that it needs for a court of law.
Okay, let me ask you this, Serena. Just give me your gut reaction to this.
Sure.
27 stab wounds, slit throat from ear to ear, and shot in the face. Does that sound to you like classic self-defense?
It could. It depends on the nature of the wounds. It depends on
Describe the scenario where
timing.
that would be self-defense.
Classic scenario, I would agree with you. But could it be? Absolutely. Depends on the forensics.
Okay.
No way.
Well,
There's no way, really. Come
I
on.
don't know. Renee says there's a way here. Even
There's
Dwayne's
a
a little.
way.
Dwayne's shaking his head a little bit on this one. Dwayne, do you at all see a scenario, a picture you could paint for a jury where that would credibly sound like self-defense? Let's throw out the first two stories.
I've got it,
she
Vinny.
made
I've
up.
got it, Vinny.
She
You
stabbed
get up
with a
in front of the
needle.
jury and you paint. You get up in front of a jury and you paint a picture of a woman that had been beaten over and over again and sexually abused by her boyfriend, and she put up with it as long as she possibly could, and at one point she just snapped and all the rage came out of her, and this is the aftermath of that, Vinny. That's how it happens. That's how they're going to argue that it happened.
But what about the 3 stories?
Well, no, I was just throwing the 3 stories out for a moment, just giving them a little bit of a break.
Oh, okay.
A little bit of a break. Now, Mike,
Well, I can explain
let's
the
talk
3
about
stories
fatal
too,
attraction.
Vinny. It's
though.
easy.
No.
When I think about these types of wounds and the manner in which this was done, Mike, to me, it is totally in sync with a fatal attraction. There is such emotion, raw emotion, in stabbing someone 27 times, slitting their throat, shooting their face. From my perspective, that is much more consistent with fatal attraction than self-defense.
It's
Yeah,
rage,
she was
Vinny, it's
rejected.
rage.
She was rejected. She was so mad. There was so much rage because he rejected her because she wanted him and he did not want to spend the rest of his life with her. And he was getting ready to go with someone else on a trip, and she was going to make sure that that didn't happen. If she couldn't have him, nobody could have him. And it's interesting, the 911 call, Vinny. Who came right up in that 911 call with his friends when they discovered his body?
Her. There's a history.
She did.
There. There's
Absolutely.
A history. Rini, how much of a problem is that history going to be? Because you have friends who know what was going on in the relationship. They know that Travis was trying to break up with her, and she shows up in town. His tires are being slashed. I mean, classic. I mean, they made a movie about this, didn't they?
In fairness, yes, that history is going to be very, very critical for the prosecution, as well as her stories. And we can't discount the statements, the post-conduct statements that she made. Very, very damaging for her. So the stab wounds and the shot aside, there's a tremendous amount of evidence here for the prosecution.
All right, good. And I'm glad, Mike, because I like when prosecutors have evidence, because I like crimes to be solved. I like the people who are guilty of the crimes to be punished. And sometimes when you don't have the evidence, you can't get it done. Let me go back to Grace Wan. Grace, Jodi Arias, these days, like we see the pictures from MySpace, and she's got the makeup on, and she's all, being Jodi Arias. These days, how would you describe her?
These days, she seems to be very conservative, demure, almost shy, I'd say. And studious. She sits next at counsel table next to her defense attorneys in the seat that's furthest from the jurors. And as the jurors are being questioned by the attorneys, occasionally there's a sidebar and the attorneys go up to speak to the judge, which leaves her alone at counsel table. And she doesn't really engage the jurors. She looks straight ahead, shows no emotion or any kind of reaction, and, takes some notes. And occasionally she will glance up and look at them, but very rarely. But the jurors, on the other hand, are very, very curious about her. I see them looking at her and almost studying her because they're being given a hypothetical. The hypothetical is that they're going to be given a case where they come back with a verdict of cold-blooded, premeditated murder, and whether they can consider a sentence other than death. And so they have to know that they're talking about her. And that's where there's a dichotomy of images. She's a frail, pale, slight woman, and yet she's being accused of a horrendous crime. So that's something that I think people are going to be very curious about and be studying her over the course of this trial.
Dwane, you guys always do this, don't you? I mean, we see the pictures of what the defendant looked like in real life, and then when it's time for a trial, it's like, who is that person? I don't even recognize him. They have this total transformation program in the jails. Or is it the criminal defense bar's total transformation program?
Vinny, trial is theater, and any good trial attorney will try to control everything that happens during a trial, from how many notebooks they have on their desk, to what the defendant looks like, to what the defendant is doing during the trial. I mean, if at all possible, I try to control everything that the jury sees from the time they walk into the courtroom till the time they walk out at the end of the day.
And theater, he didn't say it's reality, though. You know what's interesting? Gene Casares has noted this, and I think we all noticed it, but Gene really pointed it out the other day. Casey Anthony, during her trial, at counsel table, she appeared like she was like down here. She was like this low. She was like here. And they lowered her chair lower than any of the attorneys to make her look even smaller inside that courtroom. My guess is, Gene's guess is, they may very well do that with Jodi Arias as well. All right, we got a lot more to talk about. Our coverage of the Jodi Arias murder trial begins January 7th, live right here on In Session.